Good evening, everybody, and welcome to day 4 of our weather hangouts discussing the different threats associated with the monsoon season here in the southwest part of the U.S. So on Monday, we talked about heat. On Tuesday, we talked about downburst winds and dust, blowing dust. Yesterday, we had a great discussion about lightning. And today's subject is going to be about flash flooding. Let me introduce myself. My name is Tim Bryce, and I'm a meteorologist with the National Weather Service in El Paso, Texas. We're going to have a great discussion today. We've got actually a couple of subject matter experts joining us, a couple of forecasters from different offices. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion that we're going to have today. Before I jump into our first kind of question that I have or discussion point, I did want to tell everybody that if you have a question, you have Twitter, you can tweet us a question at hashtag Monsoon 2019. I'll be kind of keeping an eye on that column in my Twitter account. Or if you don't have Twitter, you can always email me, and I will keep an eye on my email as well. You can email me at tim.bryce@noaa.gov. And my last name is spelled like Price, but with a B, so it's B-R-I-C-E. So real quickly now, I'm going to introduce everyone here on the call, and it looks like we lost somebody, so hopefully he can get back on here. Joining me actually from the El Paso Weather Office, he's actually at the office right now, is the Warning Coordination Meteorologist from El Paso, Jason Laney. How are you, sir?
Doing good. Watching actually a couple of thunderstorms in our area. Don't think we're going to get any flash flooding tonight, but we're on the ready just in case.
That's okay. Also joining me on the call is Miss Megan Taylor. She's forecaster with the Flagstaff office there in northern Arizona. How are you, Miss Megan?
Hi, doing well, thanks. Good to be
Now,
here.
if memory serves, Miss Megan, you guys were issuing at least one flash flood warning a couple days ago.
We did, yeah. We had kind of a active day in our eastern Arizona area out in the White Mountains. We had a storm drop anywhere from 2 to 4 inches in about an hour or so. So we issued a warning. It was a pretty remote area. We didn't get any reports from out there, but I'm sure something happened somewhere.
Well, as we'll talk about, so many times here in the desert region of the Southwest, we get a whole lot of rain out there, and it's just bothering the coyotes and the rattlesnakes. So hopefully that's the way it usually is. But we've seen time and time again that sometimes this heavy rain falls over the towns and the urban areas, and that's when it begins to produce problems. Also joining me on the call is Mr. Craig McDougall. He's senior hydrologist with the, let me see if I get this right, Clark County, Nevada Regional Flood Control District.
That's correct, Tim. Yes, thank you for having me.
No problem. I'm going to look to you for your guidance. Also joining me on the call is Nick Novelich. He dropped off. Hopefully he can get back in. I don't know if he's got internet issues, but he's the Emergency Operations Coordinator for California Department of Transportation. So, like I said, feel free to tweet us your questions. Here comes Mr. Nick now. See if he can get back in here. But feel free to tweet us at that hashtag Monsoon 2019 or email me at tim.noaa.gov. Hey, Mr. Nick, I see you getting back in there. How are you doing, sir? We were just going down to the introductions.
Nicholas Novelich with the California Department of Transportation District 8, which covers Riverside and San Bernardino County as a whole.
Very good. You are the Emergency Operations Coordinator, is that correct?
Yes, sir, I am.
Very good. All right. I'm going to throw this first question out to Mr. Jason here real quick. And, at any time you feel, if you guys feel like adding a comment or something, feel free just to jump in there and we'll make sure that we can all see you. But Jason, can you kind of define, because people have heard flood, flash flood. Is there a difference? How do you define what a flash flood is?
In general, when we talk about flash flooding, we're talking about a quick onset of the flooding. Normally, a flood warning would be something like a river flood warning or something that kind of is ongoing for some period of time, much like what they've experienced in the Midwest as of recent with some of the ice jams and the snow melt and some of the heavier rain. But for us, a flash flood is actually a very quick onset of the flooding. It's usually a result of very heavy rain runoff. It doesn't have to would necessarily just be runoff in mountainous terrain, such as we have around here. Flash flooding can happen in more flat terrain. It can actually happen along rivers and creek beds where they begin to rise rapidly because of heavy rainfall in the area. But the key there is that it is flash flooding. It kind of comes on quickly and then begins to recede in a certain amount of time, as opposed to typical flood warnings that we issue, which are kind of long fuse warnings that could go for hours to weeks, or in some cases, or days, in some cases, even weeks, depending on the situation.
I think we're seeing that's what's going on in the Midwest right now. They've had a long stem yes, long stem river flooding, and that they can see it coming for weeks ahead of time, and then it sticks around for several days. Versus the challenge of flash flooding, and I know that from the Weather Service perspective, it is a challenge sometimes to figure out how much rain is falling, what is falling over, because it's not just the amount of rain that falls that makes the difference. Sometimes the important thing is how quickly that rain fell. Sometimes over what topography that rain fell over makes all the difference in the world. Craig, I was wondering if you can talk about the differences in like a desert environment versus an urban environment, the things that kind of make it, because you could say it's more, I guess, are urban environments more susceptible to flash flooding?
Well, the threat of flooding really becomes a factor based on location. You earlier said that flash flooding in the desert environment will impact animals, the tortoises, hares, and wild horses, for example, in Nevada. Hikers, of course, they can be out, and hopefully they have their NOAA radios with them and are able to listen to flash flood advisories and warnings as they're issued. But in an urban environment, it's a whole nother ball game. Some urban environments are relatively new, and they don't have a lot of channels and detention basins like Las Vegas currently has. The reason the Regional Flood Control District was established over 30 years ago is because there was no infrastructure in the city. And when heavy rainfall would occur in the surrounding mountains, what would the water do? It would just follow the natural washes. And next thing you know, the casinos are complaining because their parking lots are flooded and there's water going through their lobbies. So the Flood Control District was set up to not only help out with the engineering aspects of trying to direct flow away from populated areas, but also to coordinate those activities. For example, we have multiple local municipalities where they would have channels that would move water away from a large population center, but then stop right at the edge of the municipality because they say, well, that's somebody else's jurisdiction. Our role, one of our multiple roles, is to coordinate those activities so water doesn't just flow from one municipality to another, but actually continues to flow from, say, west to east and hopefully make its way to Lake Mead.
Very good. So, you touched on that before you guys really got involved, that the water just kind of went willy-nilly where it wanted to, because that's what water does. So many of in our modern cities, we try to reroute the water, and as I've been my career in the Weather Service, I've found that water knows which way to go, and if you move it and then you try to move a stream bed or try to alter the flow, if you get enough water, it says, you know what, I'm not going to go this way, I'm going to go that way. So I know that can present challenges from an engineering point of view. I don't know how like Phoenix and Tucson route their water. I know in El Paso, we don't have many streets with storm drains. I grew up in Oklahoma. Water rained, it went into the storm drains, and then it was moved away very quickly. Versus here I know a lot of cities in the Southwest, it's just cost prohibitive with the amount of rain that we do get to put a bunch of storm drains under the ground. So in the lack of, without those features in place, the main streets then become the conduit to move that water to wherever it needs to go, if it's a retention pond or a river or a lake. I don't know, for there in Vegas, do you guys have a mix of storm drains, or do you just let the streets kind of conduct the water through?
Well, after an initial heavy rain event, water will flow as sheet wash, typically down streets until they make their way to storm drains.
Mm-hmm.
And one of our popular slogans, "Turn around, don't drown," resulted from that. It's our way to get the word out to the general public that when streets are flooded, don't go through the flowing water, because all it takes is 6 inches of water to potentially take your vehicle downstream with it. But the major thoroughfares are conveyances to deliver water to the storm drains and eventually to the major channels. And again, everything flows downhill, and in our area, downhill happens to be Lake Mead.
Oh, very good. So, Mr. Nick, you can talk from the point of view of a Department of Transportation organization. Um, how do you guys route the water, move the water so that it is less impactful on the streets?
It depends on the route and the average daily traffic. On a typical conventional highway through the desert, the road will actually go through washes. So what would happen is the road would have a crown until the point where it came through a wash, and then there would be slight changes in elevation to the road to allow the water to sheet across. And like what you said earlier, you really can't control the water. And that's kind of what we do. We acknowledge the water is going to come from certain places and the road goes through it. And there's certain techniques that we do to allow the water to leave debris on one side and allow clean water to flow across. And for the most part, it does work. Obviously, you could end up with some debris, but in theory, that's how it goes. And then obviously, if there's a lot more daily traffic, you would get a bridge or some structure to carry the travel way over the water.
Very good. Miss Megan, there in Flagstaff, I know you guys, what's your average rainfall there in Flagstaff? And do you guys have storm drains, or do you kind of like El Paso, the main streets kind of channel the water down to storage basins and things like that?
So in Flagstaff, our average annual rainfall is about 21 inches or so. And during monsoon season, we get about a little over 8 inches. So we get anywhere from like 30 to 40% of our annual precipitation during monsoon season. So a fair amount of our year's water comes during the season. When it comes to drainage, so we don't have really expansive urban areas, but we do have small urban areas, Flagstaff, Prescott, some sizable populated urban areas. And we have some drainage. I wouldn't say it. I mean, it's nothing like a Phoenix or a Vegas by any means, but we do have some urban infrastructure for drainage. Here in Flagstaff, one of our main waterways is called the Rio de Flag, and it runs right through downtown Flagstaff, and it can cause quite a lot of problems actually. If we get enough heavy rain right over the downtown area, it's basically, there's some mitigation, but if there's enough rain to overtop the roads, then we start seeing flooding right in our downtown area. So there is some infrastructure to account for the water flow, but nothing like you'd see in a major urban area.
And that I've found that, because I used to be the weather service, the way we work things, we have hydrofocal points or service hydrologists, and I used to be the hydrofocal point for El Paso, and so I've gone to lots of flash flooding training, and that was one of the hydrology is kind of what I've been interested in. And one of the things that I learned about is that in these urban environments, especially in the desert Southwest, we make it doubly or even triply difficult to get water moved in a safe way, because with all Walmart parking lots, all the hardtop streets, that's all impervious surface, and the water is going to flow along that. But in the desert Southwest, so many of us do not have landscaping. We have plastic covered front yards with a bunch of rocks on it, and that again, in the Midwest, all of that water, all the rain that would fall on the different neighborhoods, much of it is just absorbed by the grass at these different homes. But I know that on my street, very few homes have actual grass in the front yard. It's all desert rock landscaping. So we like nearly double the amount of runoff that we have in the city, in the urban environments. And I know that one of the things that we have to be careful of, that when we see rain falling, we have to change our the rain amount thresholds. And maybe Megan, you can talk about this. That when you 1 inch of rain in like 30 minutes in the desert is one kind of concern, versus 1 inch of rain over your urban environments, over Flagstaff itself, would give you pause to make a different kind of decision. So
Yeah.
where the rain is actually falling can make a big difference when you're trying to evaluate if it's flash flood or is it just a regular kind of flood. So can you talk to some of those challenges that you as a forecaster have with that?
Absolutely. Yeah, if we think about Flagstaff, we're up in a ponderosa pine forest, and say heavy rain, couple inches of rain falling in the ponderosa pine forest isn't going to do much. But you put that couple inches of rain in, say, an hour over downtown Flagstaff, and we have major flooding going on. So it is entirely, the surface really makes a difference on where the rain is falling. And we cover all of northern Arizona, so we have a very diverse land mass that we cover. So we cover the Grand Canyon, which of course is very rocky, a lot less vegetation than up here in the pine forest. So we can get flash flooding very easily there,
Mm-hmm.
where it's rock and bedrock surfaces and it's really not absorbing much water at all. So it really is dependent on where the rain is falling, especially in our forecast area, since we have anything from desert to really alpine forest up in the mountains.
Very true. Very true. And Craig, I don't mean to put you on the spot. But let me ask you, or anyone can chime in here. What are some of the factors that we've talked about? Surface. The surface, is it concrete? Is it dirt? Is it grass? Is it desert? What are some of the factors that make a difference between a 1 inch rain being just a general kind of rain, if it all comes down in 30 minutes, versus a flash flood?
Well, our annual rainfall is only 4.19 inches in Las Vegas, but when it all comes down at once, that's always the big concern. When you're talking about 1 inch of rainfall, most of our soils are hard packed and they don't allow a lot of absorption. And so if we had a minor rain event a day or two prior to a heavy rain event, there will be no absorption of that water being able to percolate into the ground. And so all that rainfall becomes runoff. And then the question is, well, where does the runoff lead to? Yeah, out in the desert, we do have a couple of rivers in the northeast portion of the county. And if it rains over several hours, a 1 inch rain isn't going to really do a whole lot. But 1 inch of rain in as little as 30 minutes or 15 minutes over a wash will turn into a major flash flood event. And we have to notify the folks downstream of those heavy rainfall conditions, hopefully with enough time where they can take preventive measures.
Very true. Now, one of the reasons we're so concerned, and I passed over this, so I want to go kind of back to it, is that the importance. I don't think people realize the impact that flash flooding has on not only the infrastructure of the United States, but actually on the people of the United States. I see that another guest has joined us. Let me introduce you to Trevor Boucher. He's forecaster in the Las Vegas office. How you doing, Mr. Trevor?
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes, you sound good.
Great.
Very good.
Thanks for letting me be on. Sorry we were late.
No problem. You see, you got one of your partners. Craig is here. Craig McDougall.
Hey, Craig, how you doing?
Good. How you doing?
Pretty good. We actually
Great.
haven't had a chance to meet because I'm brand new to this office, so I haven't had a chance to actually get to know Craig that well, but we have spoken on the phone a number of times.
Oh, yeah.
Good. So I was just we jumped right in and started talking about flash flooding and the challenges in the urban environment versus the desert environment that we're all kind of familiar with. But I think I'm putting the cart before the horse. Why is it important to talk about flash flooding? And one of the things that I want to show is we've shown this a couple of times on these different hangouts. On Monday we showed it to show that we were talking about heat. Heat is a big killer of people each year. On average, for the last 30 years, we've had 136 people die because of the heat. But if you look, The number two, if you look at the 30-year average, not tornado, not lightning, not hurricane, but is actually flooding in some capacity, and a fair amount of that is flash flooding. And you can see it's actually very consistent at about, if I'm doing the math here real quickly, about 90 people, 89 people each year lose their lives because of flash flooding. And that's unfortunate. I believe many of those people, many of those flash flooding deaths could be prevented. So, we have a great campaign in the Weather Service that says when thunder roars, go indoors. And I definitely think that as you look at this chart, you can see how the trend in the 30-year trend to the 10-year to the 1-year trend is definitely on the downswing. But you can see that we cannot say the same in the flash flooding area, where the 30, it's all about flat, I would say, is a good way to interpret that. Like Craig mentioned, we do have a saying in the Weather Service: turn around, don't drown. And I guess we'll kind of trot out to this one right now, because I was going to save this question for a little bit later. And Mr. Jason's got one of our great signs. Says, when flooded, turn around, don't drown. You may have seen this appearing at different flooded roadways and things like that. But I'm going to throw the question out there. I was going to try to wait until later, but it kind of fits in here. Here we go. Why do people drive? Why do they go around the barriers that say flooded, don't pass? Why does that happen? And I know before anyone answers, I know we're not going to solve this because that's more of a social science question, but I just kind of wonder what people's opinions are on that. So anyone can just chime on in here.
I think it's just the fact that we are such a mobile, active, busy society. People don't like the unexpected, and certainly having a flash flood occur in the middle of their busy day is rather inconvenient, and perhaps for the same reason why people decide to chance crossing a railroad when the guardrails are down, hoping they can make it across before the train gets there. It's that same kind of mentality. It's unfortunate. But we see that on a regular basis on news reports. How do you fix something like that? I wish I was a social psychologist. I'd have an answer for you.
I want to show this video while we're continuing to talk about this. This is a school bus that went, I don't know, it's hard to see, but the school bus driver just right there onto the right is a sign that says the road is flooded. And the school bus driver, and I believe there was one student in the bus with the school bus driver, is continuing on down the road. So again, this is a school bus driver, but we've seen it over and over again. Like Craig said, people just get in a hurry. They keep moving. Does anyone else want to comment on this? Why? But you'll see here in just a second, the school bus, here it comes. I'll just talk us through it here. The school bus, there's clearly water going across that road. I don't know if the bus driver was not, I would think the bus driver would be familiar with this road and would know that that's pretty deep water. Oh, it's over my hood. And now the bus is like a big boat and it is in trouble. And it's at the mercy of the floodwater. And this bus literally floats downstream for quite a while.
Amazing.
I did want to chime in here real quick. Here in the state of Arizona, and I can't answer the question, but in the state of Arizona, we actually have a law. So lawmakers have tried to put some effort into getting people to not drive around barriers. We have a law called the Stupid Motorists Law. It's literally called that.
Well named.
And it basically says if there's proof that you drove around a barrier and you had to be rescued, you can actually be liable for the cost of your rescue, or at least a portion of the cost of your rescue. So that comes up about every year out here, is the Stupid Motorist Law, and reminding people that, hey, if you make a dumb decision, you can actually be liable for some of the costs.
And that's actually very similar. I know that in our area, if a hiker goes up into the mountains and gets injured or something, and they have to bring out the mountain rescue team, they are liable for that rescue team. And then I something that I don't think people really put in their mind is that when they drive around this, it'd be one thing if you're putting your own life at risk, but so many people, when they do this, they've got kids in the back seat, they got somebody else with them. But even if it was just them and they're putting their own lives at risk, once their car starts to float down the stream, guess what has to happen? Some firefighters, some urban and water rescue officers have to go in and risk their own lives to save you because you made a momentarily, I'll be polite and say, poor decision. So that's the frustration, is that, that Darwin law kind of thing. If you drive around the barrier, you almost get what you deserve. But we send people in to try to rescue these people. That's what they're supposed to do. But it just seems like it's stupid, because you're putting not only yourself at risk, but the men and women who are working on the rescue teams, their lives at risk as well. So I scratch my head too whenever I read another story about someone who is driven around a clearly closed road, thinking that I'm in my big SUV, I'm in a bus, what could it do to me? And they keep right on going. Does anyone else want to kind of chime in real quickly on this?
Hey, Tim, go
one
ahead.
thing that it probably works to their disadvantage is some of our routes are literally 3 to 4 hours away from help. So it's not as easy as you decide to drive around that barricade and go through that wash. You can't call 911 and someone's going to come 5-10 minutes to help you. Help could literally be hours away, and we've experienced that before. But tying it back to the signs, a lot of it, especially for us, is those signs don't come down. They're up all the time, and I think people become used to seeing them but don't actually pay attention to what they're saying.
Very good point. So that puts it on you from a Department of Transportation to be kind of proactive. That, okay, when there's flooding, yes, we need to run out there and put the signs up. But when the flooding stops, you need to pull those signs down, because just like if you issue too many tornado warnings and people kind of get desensitized to them, if every time they drive past a spot it says possible, when flooded,
and this one route that we have, those signs are stationary. They stay up all the time. And similar across the desert, the washes come from miles and miles away. So it's not as simple as there's thunderheads out, you need to go put the signs. There could be no clouds visible and water can come. So those signs stay up year round, just because we don't know where the water or when the water will come, but it's our due diligence to say, if there's water, you shouldn't probably drive through there.
Now, do you guys, when you do hear of a flood at a certain location, will you go out and put like extra barriers up or try to prevent people from driving across them?
We do, but it's limited to what our, how would you say, our responsibility of the route is.
Or your resources.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Or your simple resource, the resources that you have available to you.
Resources, when weather comes into an area, maintenance crews go into a storm patrol mode. So everyone that works in that facility is out just patrolling and maintaining the area. So it's not so much of a personnel issue, but there's really, like we said before, if the water's coming, you can't stop it, you can't control it, you can't divert it. It's going to do what it wants to do. And we just kind of warn people, you should probably just wait before you drive through there.
Right. Well, again, you try to help people as best that they can, but it still ultimately comes down to whoever's behind that wheel. It's their responsibility. Trevor, did you want to chime in here real quick?
Yeah, specifically on signage, a lot of the times we don't know. I mean, in this example that you put out there about somebody passed a sign that's permanently there, and then the bus was going pretty quickly through it. What we see and then their motivation for making the decisions they make are not always that clear. For instance, if we're talking about permanent signage, are we making an assumption that the person is fluent in English enough to read that sign? is that something that they're going to be able to understand? Did they even see it? If it's right in the middle of your path, obviously that's going to be obstructing your ability to even go that way, and then we can ask questions about why they would drive around it. But if it's something like permanent signage, which is just generally there for your information, I would start to think, especially in areas that English is not the most dominant language. It's probably the majority, but you have a significant amount of Spanish speakers that, or for instance, any other language, that could be one contributor to why they may not be using that sign, or that sign that might not be that effective. But then also the circumstances of what they're on the road for. Maybe it is an emergency, and as we just mentioned, what if that is a cutoff point, and that's the only way they can get, somebody to get medical help or anything like that. When you're in a chaotic environment like a severe storm that's generating a type of flooding, then the decisions that you make are sometimes on the fly, and you're willing to make this risk because you've seen other people do it, you've seen yourself do it, you have an experience bias, and just because there's water flowing over the roadway, well, if I go fast enough, I might just make it, and the chance that I make it is enough that I want to risk it. And so just simply saying turn around, that doesn't incorporate every scenario that the person might be in. And so so from my standpoint, like looking at things like signage, well, yeah, a sign doesn't solve the problem. It certainly helps, but there might be some other aspects of what's going on that could complicate the situation.
That's a very good point. But still, it comes down to who's driving that car and making those wise decisions. Jason, one of the things that the Weather Service, because we've been talking about signage, but one of the things that the Weather Service does is that we have kind of a suite of flood products. Can you kind of walk us through flood watch, flash flood warning, flash flood watch, or flood watch, and things like that?
Yeah, let me see. I've actually got a. Hold on. Okay, yeah, I was making sure you could still hear me there. I've got a screen share here. I'll go ahead and see if I can get that one to come up for you. Basically, two of your basic ones here are going to be the flood warning and the flood watch. This, of course, goes for flash flood warnings as well. Basically, the word warning is going to be the key that people need to listen to, because when we mention warning, whether it's about flooding, whether it's about severe thunderstorms or tornadoes, that means that the threat is imminent or ongoing at that moment. It means if you're not experiencing the flooding right now, chances are the flooding is on its way in a short period of time, or the flooding is already taking place. A watch, on the other hand, comes into play whenever we're talking about the possibility for some flooding. This will happen after several days of heavier rainfall when the ground is saturated. And of course, we realize that any additional rain, which we may be predicting, has no place to go. It's going to run off and lead to some of that flooding. But we also come up with a couple of other things that we tend to talk about around these parts, and that is the difference between a aerial flood advisory and a flash flood warning. And we tend to issue a lot more of these aerial flood advisories. And again, advisory versus warning is just a level of flooding or perceived threat that we're looking at there. Different offices may have different thresholds or guidelines that they go through. And one of the problems that we run into that is just that it's going to be a perception. If someone says, hey, it's just a flood advisory, that means it must not be as bad as a flood warning. So yeah, I see water covering the road, but the Weather Service just issued a flood advisory. They didn't say it was a warning. So I'm advised that there's a little flooding. I think I'll just go on through it anyway. So a lot of this has to do with just public perception. But again, whether we're issuing a flood advisory or a flood warning, that means that there is flooding taking place out there. And it's not wise to try to judge the extent on your own.
Now, going back to what you were talking about, the watch versus the warning, I always like this analogy with the cupcakes. And you've got all the ingredients there. Everything's ready to go. It's the same thing as a watch, but when that cupcake's sitting in front of you, that's when you're cupcake warning. So basically, like Jason was saying, when all the ingredients look like they're coming together, we'll issue that watch. But when the flooding is actually happening, when it is right there in front of you, that's when we issue the warning. So kind of a nice analogy that has popped up on Twitter from time to time. Oh, speaking of Twitter, I did want to remind everybody, if you wanted to ask any of our panelists a question, you can use the hashtag Monsoon 2019. and I'm keeping one eye on Twitter. Also, if you don't have a Twitter account, you can feel free to email me at tim.bryce@noaa.gov, and Bryce is spelled like price, but with a B. So feel free to drop us any questions either via Twitter or on my email, and I'd be happy to answer your questions. I did want to show this video. Maybe somebody can comment on it, because I don't think a lot of people know what a flash flood in the desert kind of looks like. So this is a flash flood in the desert in kind of just one of these smaller arroyos. But the first time I saw this several years ago, I was just stunned by the amount of debris, because what happens is that a lot of these arroyos, they stay dry for years and years, and all of a sudden this wall of water comes rolling down, and it's literally, as you watch here, this is 2 or 3 feet of water coming down here, but it's pushing all of this debris along with it right at the leading edge. It actually looks like a big dusty kind of thing until finally the water spills out, but you can see how quickly it was right there. And all of a sudden, if you were going across that roadway when it came along, or you tried to slip across after it had gone by, that road is now, that water is moving along fast enough to sweep your car, or for sure a person, off the road. And you saw all the debris associated with that, and that water is really moving. I always like to show that. And just like, believe it or not, just like that, as there are people that storm chase tornadoes in the Midwest, and I'm not recommending this to anybody, but there are people who chase these flash floods. And I think it was Nick that mentioned that sometimes we get these the floods. What happens is that you get the rain up in the mountains, and then the water works its way down. So what these people do is that they know the different arroyos, and they know that, you know, certain headwaters for a certain arroyo got 2 to 3 inches of rain, and they'll just park themselves down at the bottom of this arroyo, and they'll wait an hour or so, and all of a sudden, just like you saw in the video, this wall of water comes rolling down at them, and they call flash flood chasers. So it's kind of interesting to watch them. On the one hand, you know, that leading edge of that flood wave they're able, I've seen the videos, they're actually able to kind of run along with it as they're running on they're not in the channel, but they're running on the bank. They're able to keep up with it, which means it's going at about running speed, but still, you still saw how quickly, though, once it came, it was up and over that low water crossing there, and just totally just caused the inundation of that low water crossing. So, yeah, on the one hand, these floods kind of move slowly. That's why it takes, you know, an hour to work off the mountain. But when they're there, that water is rushing very quickly. And then I'll ask Mr. Craig here, because I think you mentioned this earlier. How much water does it take to wash a car off the road? And I'm going to show a video while you're talking about that.
It doesn't take much water at all. As little as 6 inches over a roadway is enough to pick up a small vehicle and wash it downstream. I'm sure that bus, of course, had a lot more water, with you seeing in the video the water coming up to the hood of the bus. So several feet of water is what it took to move that vehicle. But it's all relative based on the size and the weight of the vehicle. But our standard guidance is 6 inches as too much. You don't want to chance it.
Well, and I think a lot of people, because I'm showing an animation that the Weather Service has put together of a car that drove across a low water crossing and, you know, gets floated away, that people in these their big trucks, in these big SUVs, kind of make the assumption that that's for a car. That's for a car. That's not for my truck. That's, you know, not for me. And but like you're saying, it does not take much water, and people continually underestimate, just like that bus driver did, the amount of water it takes to get yourself swept off the road. Let me, Jason, what you got up here on the screen?
This is just a what to do if you get caught in a flash flood. Obviously, you don't do what that car just did.
Don't do it.
That's true. So what do we got? Prepare to evacuate. So again, pay attention to the antecedent conditions. Know that there's a chance of heavy rain in the forecast. When you see flooded roadways or creek beds, don't cross them on foot, because if it only takes 6 inches of water to wash a car away, it takes much less for swiftly moving water to sweep you off your feet. Of course, we've already mentioned, don't drive through flooded roadways. If your vehicle stalls, get out of it as quick as you can. But it's, again, better don't go across the flooded roadway, and of course, be cautious at night. And I had that as one of my comments, that many times the flash flood deaths occur with people driving at night. And I'll ask Nick here real quick. What does nighttime? How does that provide or create challenges for drivers when we're talking about flash flooding?
Well, you're limited to the view of your headlights. Now you're getting into if your vehicle is properly prepared. If your headlights are misadjusted, you could cut your night vision in half and just nearly see 100 feet in front of you. Also, for whatever it is, all the bad things happen at night. I think the worst storms that I've been in while I was at work always seemed to happen when it was dark out. You don't have your depth perception. You can't see as far. You're just literally stuck to as far as your headlights can shine to see what's going on.
And that can be, just like you said, that can be the challenges, is that you are driving along a road that you are very familiar with, but it's nighttime, and if you come around the curve and you weren't paying attention that it rained up above you in the mountains or the higher terrain, all of a sudden there is a lake in front of you, essentially, and you have to make a split-second decision. And sometimes people are going too fast. They don't realize what's going on, and they just drive right into that water. Mr. Jason, can you remind me, we had a flash flooding, pair of people die in flash flooding death a couple years ago up in Silver City, New Mexico. That was a nighttime incident, was it not?
Yeah, it actually was. I had a couple of gentlemen who were coming back from a concert that evening. Actually, the concert got canceled early because of thunderstorms, and they were trying to take a shortcut home, and they came across a roadway that had the permanent signage there, and it's well known to residents of this little mountain community that this is one of the many low water crossings. And you showed a low water crossing just a little while ago where that creek came rushing across the road, and it was nighttime. It had been raining. There was the signage there, but they were in a fairly large truck, and they made the decision to, hey, I think we can get through this. So they gave it a little extra gas, pushed through, and unfortunately they didn't make it. They washed well downstream, and it turned out that one of them tried to get out of the vehicle to try to get to safety, and his body was found almost half a mile further down the creek from the one that was still left in the automobile.
We tell people, if you do get caught in a flood or the floodwaters are coming up, so many people, they cling to their car as their lifeboat, I guess, in many ways. I tell people, when we were when I was up doing flash flood training up in Colorado, it seems like Colorado is like a flood or a flash flood magnet. They had various large floods up there, a big Thompson Canyon flood, a Fort Collins flood. But one of the things they stressed to us was, tell people it is better to get wet than to be dead. So, a lot of people say, I don't want to, it's raining hard. I think I'm safe in my car, but the water's coming up. It's better to just get out, get to higher ground. And sometimes that higher ground can be just a few feet up to get out of the way of the water that's coming across. So I can't stress enough the importance that you as a driver, if you're driving a vehicle, is to take responsibility and don't drive across flooded roadways. If you get caught in one of those, get out of your car as quickly as possible and seek higher ground. Now, I hadn't thrown this out. I threw out the statistics on average, what we were seeing for flash flood deaths, but this is the actual numbers for the flash flood deaths so far in 2019. And Trevor will be, I think, familiar with this page from the Austin, the flood group in Austin. They help keep track of all the flash flood fatalities around. And you'll take a notice there. You'll see the vast majority of just this year alone, of the 59 flash flood deaths we've already had this year, and we're not even halfway through the year, 39 of those occurred while people were driving. You can also see walking or hiking at home. boating, or some fell in, which is unfortunate, because that's another thing is that, and we can touch on this a little bit more, stay away from flash floods, stay away from the creek beds. But so many of these people were just driving in their vehicles. And I know that Trevor used to work at San Antonio, Austin, where it seems like in that area, Trevor, can you talk about the topography and things that makes flash flooding in the San Antonio, Austin area particularly a challenge for you, the office there?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people understand or have heard about Tornado Alley, but actually down there in Austin, San Antonio, it's known as Flash Flood Alley, and it's because of how prevalent flash flooding can be. Not just because it's close to the Gulf of Mexico and you get a lot of moisture, but also because of the unique topographic situation that's going on. The Edwards Plateau is just to the north and west of both San Antonio and Austin. And Austin and San Antonio are located on the I-35 corridor. So the I-35 corridor parallels the edge of that plateau. So all the water that falls on the plateau is going to go down the rivers and channels and whatnot and go right towards that major thoroughfare for both cities. So very quickly that can become a larger event, very, very quickly, just due to gravity. Even doesn't have to be all that much rain that fell on the river itself, that can end up contributing to a whole lot of rainfall. But having said that, there's also the fact that it's that close to the Gulf of Mexico, and then you can have tropical systems that can impact it as well as the topographic features. So it becomes a very interesting place where 6 to 12 inches of rain is definitely not uncommon. And then it's kind of eye-opening for me now, moving out to the west into the more of an arid climate, because now 6 to 12 inches anywhere in the Las Vegas area was going to be an absolute catastrophe. And so it's been quite a learning experience from a meteorological perspective to understand that you don't have to wait for 1, 2, 3 inches of rain before it becomes a significant issue. We're out here in the west, even more so. You have these topographic issues, and then just a drainage concern, a hydrological issue, where now a 1/4 inch at the right time in the right place can be just as catastrophic to potential life and property than it would be 3 to 6 inches down there in Texas. So there's some things that work towards it, in favor of potentially not being flooding in the Austin San Antonio area, mostly like whether it's not arid, so that it can absorb some of that moisture. But all the urban effects, like downtown San Antonio, can flood in a 1/4 inch of rain really quickly, just as much as it would out here. So it's from a meteorological perspective and from a forecasting and warning perspective, it's been quite an eye-opening experience for somebody like me that is used to that type of climate, and then moving out here to quite a bit different one.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why we do this Monsoon Awareness Week, because we have so many transplants here. I know that Las Vegas in general has quite a what did I say, a transient population. They're there visiting and things like that. That can prove challenges. And then we have in the Southwest, a lot of people like to get out and enjoy the mountains and the hiking trails and things. And Megan, I'm going to kind of switch gears here a little bit, but I was wondering if you could kind of go over some flooding or flash flood safety tips for campers, because I don't know how many stories I've heard of people saying, yeah, we went to bed in our tent and in the night it started to rain, and before we knew it, we woke up and there was water all around us. And I've heard that over and over again. So what are some tips for people who are camping when it comes to flash flooding?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we have a lot of people up here in our forest that like to come up and camp in the summer. People flood up here from the Phoenix metropolitan area and from all over to camp in the summer. And really, to me, the best thing you can remember is during monsoon season, when we have thunderstorms developing basically every single day. It's just not the time of year that you want to camp next to a stream. So that's my number one. During monsoon season, it's really best to just avoid camping in low-lying areas, period, because we do our best to forecast the weather every day. But there are days when something comes along that we weren't expecting, and just one storm in the right spot could lead to some flash flooding. And maybe it's really localized, but you always have to be prepared. So the entire season long, you really have to be prepared and know that hazardous weather could happen almost at any time. So that would be my number one, is just staying away from vulnerable areas to flooding during monsoon season. Secondly, I would say you really have to pay attention to the forecast. So having some situational awareness before you head out, and know that weather may occur on your trip. So maybe you're planning a camping trip that's a week long, and you check the forecast before you go. Maybe you're backpacking and you don't have access to weather on your trip. So it's really important to be prepared no matter what for any type of hazardous weather during monsoon season. But if you do have means to check the weather, by all means, take a cell phone with you. Try to camp in areas where you'll get cell phone service so that you'll actually get a warning through the the WEA, the emergency alert system. If not, maybe you take a weather radio with you. Try to think about these things ahead of time before you venture outside, so you don't get stuck in a situation, where you're vulnerable to flooding. So a lot of things to think about, but my number one is just making sure that you're thinking ahead and you're thinking about the things that could happen before you go out. And I think that's the most important thing people can do, is really plan ahead and be prepared all season long for all types of hazardous weather this time of year.
Very true. I think that so many people spend so much time thinking about, how many hot dogs to bring, how many hamburger buns to bring. They should make sure you add to your checklist, you know, do I have my weather radio with me, or do I make sure I have a cell phone that I can stay charged? Because, and you touched on it, we mentioned this when we were talking about dust earlier, that if the National Weather Service does issue a flash flood warning, it is what's called a WIA alert, and it will show up on your phones if you're in that little polygon that's drawn. You guys may have seen the little square that's drawn. So if you're in that polygon, it will alert. It'll make a noise on your phone. So we encourage people to have their phone with them, or like Megan said, to have a weather radio. So just be aware. Again, we do our best in the Weather Service to give people heads up that this is occurring, but it still comes down to you as a person, that if it's monsoon season and you decide, this creek bed is a nice place to camp, you have to make some wise decisions when it comes to camping and enjoying the outdoors during the monsoon season. So very true. Very good words there, Miss Megan. All right. Gosh, it's already been 52 minutes. So I got one more quick question. I'm going to ask this to Craig, and then we'll kind of wrap things up, because I know I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. We haven't talked about what's called antecedent conditions, and that's what's already happened can really affect what will happen when rain comes. Whether it's been a rainy time and the ground saturated versus dry. How do antecedent conditions either help or make worse a flooding situation?
Yeah, previous rainfall, already mentioned this earlier, where the ground that doesn't absorb a lot of moisture to begin with, if it's already saturated a day or two prior to a major rain event, there will not be any additional ability for that percolation to occur. And once the rain hits the ground, it just becomes immediate runoff. And I just wanted to thank Megan for quoting the Boy Scout motto, "Be prepared." As a former assistant scoutmaster, I would take boys out into the deserts, and I would ask them, when we approach a wash with nice sandy conditions, I will say, "This looks like a great spot to set up a tent. Do you folks agree?" Some boys would say yes, some would say no, and I would say, "Well, if you did, even though the ground's nice and soft to set up a tent, there's a reason it's nice and soft. It's because previous rainfalls have occurred and flash flooding has occurred in this wash. Hence, you don't want to put a tent in a wash, even if you think it's not going to rain, because if it's raining nearby, guess what? That wash could fill up with water. But there's another spot, a little bit uphill. The ground's a little bit harder. You have to work a little harder to get those tent stakes in, but you'll be a lot safer by doing that." So education is another important element to getting the word out to folks about safety while being in the great outdoors.
Very good. Well, I thank you for answering that. Like I said, we've been it's just a little bit before we've been on the air here for about an hour. So I'm going to wrap things up. So I'm going to tell you those people who are watching on YouTube, this is your last chance. If you want to ask us a question, we're going to kind of wrap things up here. But you can quickly send us a tweet at Monsoon, hashtag Monsoon 2019. And I'm still looking at Twitter, or you can drop me an email at tim.rice@noaa.gov. So as we kind of wrap things up here, I'm going to go down the line. I'm going to have each person here kind of give their last tip or word of advice to the people who are watching either right now or later when they view this video. Miss Megan, I'm going to start with you. What's your last kind of takeaway for tonight?
My biggest takeaway is, if I could say just a few words, it would be make weather a part of your plan this summer. So regardless of what activity it is you're doing outside, make weather a part of the plan. So you're checking the weather and you're also prepared and you're thinking about the weather before you go. What are the things that could happen? Maybe it's lightning, maybe it's flash flooding, maybe it's hail. Think about these things ahead of time and have a plan of how you're going to react. Have a safety plan of a safe location you can get to if weather strikes. So that would be my summary, is just make weather a part of your plan before you head outside this summer.
Very good. Mr. Craig, what are your last words of wisdom?
Well, my last words of wisdom will be a shameless plug to visit regionalflood.org. If you are out and about in Clark County and want to maintain situational awareness of rain conditions around you, we have a network of 207 rain gauges, and you can overlay National Weather Service radar so you can see when it's raining, where it's raining, and how hard.
So where do I go on the webpage to see that?
On the upper left, where it says rainfall and weather, the small text below that will take you to our gauge map.
Oh, there it is. Rainfall maps. Here we go.
Right.
Okie dokie.
And you have the little disclaimer there. Just click that. And then all those blue circles, those are our gauges. We do have some gauges in Mojave County and along the Colorado River that are operated by the Park Service. We are upgrading our communications infrastructure, but in the next couple of weeks, there are going to be plenty of blue circles available. And so when it's raining, you'll see the rates of rainfall. And the green text in the lower right will actually pull up a graph chart that will correspond to return rate intervals for rainfall. That's a useful tool, but feel free to explore the gauge map. If you have any questions, just send us an email and I'll be happy to respond.
And I know the people in Phoenix have the Maricopa County Flood Control District has a very similar webpage to that.
Very similar, yes. Most municipalities in the Southwest have this ability, not all. The larger population centers will tend to have them, though.
Very good. Mr. Nick, what are your last takeaways from today?
Pay attention to the signs. They're there for a reason. And I'll throw a shameless plug out. If you're in the state of California, Caltrans has a phone app, computer app, however you want to access it, quickmap.com. It's available in all the app stores, but it's up to the information of whatever has to do with an interstate or a state route in the state of California.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Mr. Trevor, what is your takeaways for tonight?
I got to unmute myself and then I can give them to you. Yep. I was going to say, be cautious of the rumors. I think one thing that a lot of what I heard before I moved from Austin to Las Vegas was that, hey, once you go out to Las Vegas, there won't be anything for you to forecast because there's no weather there that can really hurt anybody. And then you look at the statistics that you just showed that showed the number 1 and 2 killers are heat and flood, and those are the 2 biggest concerns that we have out in this area. So don't believe all the myths that about the weather that you hear about them. It's just the desert's just hot. Well, that's the way it is. Well, it's the kind of heat that can kill you, and it's also the type of flooding that can also do that type of thing too. So definitely get yourself educated, be weather ready and weather aware, and then almost all of the things can be solved by just simply being a little bit proactive, knowing where you can get your information, where you can get your notifications, and then just studying up just a little bit about where am I going and what is the main thing to be concerned with there.
You know, we talked about this on Monday. So many of the heat-related fatalities could be prevented if people took some precautions and took care of their neighbors and things like that. And the same thing is here. So many of these flash flood deaths could be prevented if people just took their precautions, stayed weather aware, and didn't drive around those signs. Mr. Jason, what are your final words?
All right, we may have touched on this while I was away, but remember, first of all, flooding can occur even if it's not raining where you are, because flooding can occur a distance from the storm. Secondly, even after it has stopped raining, flooding could continue for some time. One of the big fears that we have is parents letting their children go out and play in the leftover floodwaters after the rain has come to an end. Keep in mind that that water is still rushing away. It rushes into culverts that may not be seen. The children can be swept into those. So please be aware of the fact that as long as the water is there, it is still dangerous, even if the storm has passed.
Very true. And we just touched on that, I think that on that statistic on that flash flood page, it mentioned that two of those people who died in flash flooding, it says right here, fell in. Well, if you stay away from the floodwaters, the chances of you falling in are greatly reduced. So just like Mr. Jason said, stay away from those floodwaters. I know that they can be cool, they can be fun to watch, but just stay away from them, especially if you have children. Do not let your children go out and play with them, especially in urban environments where there are that water trying to funnel down through some of those storm sewers, if they are available. Those are just guaranteed death traps once those kids get in that water. So, all righty. I want to thank everybody for joining us again tonight. I want to thank our panel, Mr. Craig, Mr. Nick, Jason, Megan, and Mr. Trevor, all joining us. Did a great job. I want to thank you for watching and joining us. I really enjoy doing these. So we've covered 4 subjects this week. We covered heat on Monday, downburst and dust on Tuesday. Wednesday was lightning, and today we had a great conversation about flash flood and flash flood safety. Tomorrow we're going to wrap up. We're going to have one more hangout. It's going to be wrap up time. So we're going to do a review of all that we've covered, but there's things that we didn't get a chance to cover, and that included fire weather and debris flows and things like that that also occur this time of year when we talk about the monsoon in the desert Southwest. So stay tuned to your local NWS Twitter account or Facebook account. They'll be posting the link to this tomorrow's broadcast. It will be at the same time. It's just at a different link. If not, you can go to the National Weather Service El Paso's YouTube account, and that would be youtube.com/user/NWS El Paso, and you'll see them listed across the bottom there. Those that we have scheduled, and it should be just one now because it's going to be on tomorrow. So again, thank you to everybody who joined us on the call today. Great discussion, great words of advice, and I want to just encourage everybody to head out. If you do head out, be safe. And as I'm talking, I'm going to ask Mr. Jason, would there be a thunder in my neighborhood here on the east side of El Paso? Because it sounds like I got something right out my window right now.
It's just crossing the mountain right now. You're probably only about 3 or 4 minutes away.
Very good. Well, then let's. I'm going to wrap this up. I do thank everybody for joining us. Got a little thunder rumbling in the background. Thank you, everybody who watched online. Remember, stay safe. When you go outside, just keep an eye to the weather, plan ahead, and stay safe when you get out. So have a good evening, everybody. And like I said, stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you.